first nuclear missile subs in the United States Navy were a bit of an awkward hodgepodge of the strange first-generation Regulus cruise missiles and older, obsolete diesel subs converted to carry them. In total, the U.S. built 5 of these Regulus-style cruise missile submarines in the mid-1950s in an attempt at fielding a fleet of vessels that could take nuclear weapons within range of the Regulus missiles, which was about 500 miles. The USS Tunny was the first of these subs to be modified to launch the Regulus missiles. The Tunny was a World War II era diesel sub that was modified with a watertight external hangar attached to its deck right behind the sail, which 2 Regulus missiles could be loaded into. The Tunny provided a test bed for the program to develop its tactics and do trial and error tests with. The first Regulus missile was launched from her deck on July 15, 1953, and a second sub was soon modified to carry the Regulus missiles as well, which was the USS Barbero, another recommissioned World War II diesel sub. It was modified in the same way as the Tunny had been, with an external hangar, and was recommissioned in October of 1955, performing its first Regulus launch in March of 1956. The 2 subs began their patrols shortly after completing their sea trials. This was really good news to the Navy's ears, and they immediately ordered 2 larger missile subs capable of carrying twice the number of missiles each. They wanted them so badly, actually, that they changed the design of 2 subs that were actually currently being built in the middle of their construction. The 2 boats, the USS Grayback and the USS Growler, were converted through the addition of a section containing the missile hangar on the bow, as opposed to the stern tanks on the original 2 sub conversions. This was a little bit awkward looking, as you would expect. So far, they had 4 Regulus missile subs, and all of them looked like something from an episode of Johnny Quest. Not the traditional sleek subs that we have prowling the seas these days. These 2 new subs were known as the Grayback class. The 2 newer subs were to carry Regulus II missiles, which had supersonic speed and a 1,000-mile range, but were twice as big as the Regulus I missiles. So instead of 4 missiles, they were back down to only carrying 2 missiles again. Then, to add to the confusion, the Navy was already developing ballistic missiles launched from a tube, like modern submarines, so they decided to cancel the Regulus II missiles and just stick with the Regulus I missiles. Yeah, I know, make up your mind, Navy. So, now the Navy had 4 cruise missile submarines cruising the world's oceans. All of them were diesel-electric. A 5th sub was designed and currently being built to accommodate Regulus missiles and was also going to be a diesel. But by 1958, the advantages of nuclear power had been demonstrated by the USS Nautilus, and the plans for the USS Halibut were modified, also in the middle of its construction, to be a nuclear-powered sub. It was also supposed to carry Regulus II missiles, so a larger hangar had been designed into the sub, but once the Regulus II missiles were scrapped, it suddenly had room to carry 5 Regulus I missiles. The USS Halibut performed the first launch of a guided missile from a nuclear submarine during its initial shakedown cruise in March of 1960. The launching of one of the missiles was awkward, as their designs were, especially on the Tunny and Barbero. The boat had to surface, the men had to come out onto the deck, move the missile into a launcher, then retreat below decks while the missiles were launched. On the Grayback class subs, the process was semi-automated, but still required the boat to surface and men to come outside to operate the system to an extent. On the USS Halibut, however, it was fully automated. The only drawback was the boat still had to surface, and it took over 15 minutes from that point to launch the missile, so it's kind of slow. The 5 subs had managed to bridge the gap for the United States and act as a legitimate nuclear deterrent, but obviously the system was rigged together and was troublesome to implement. The ballistic missile program had bore fruit, and by 1957 the Polaris SLBM had been developed. The Navy immediately wanted to field the missile, and again looked to the new submarine that was being built and modified it to carry the missiles in the middle of its construction. The planned USS Scorpion was selected, and a 130-foot section was built into the stern of the boat with a compartment capable of carrying 16 Polaris nuclear missiles. The new boat would be called the USS George Washington and entered service in 1959, obviously changing submarine nuclear strategy forever. But the Regulus-class subs remained in service in the Pacific Theater as a nuclear deterrent until 1963. Of the 5 Regulus boats, only one remains afloat, the USS Growler, and it is now a museum boat in New York City. At the end of the Regulus program, it was decommissioned and put into reserve in May of 1964. Although intended to be converted to a troop transport vessel, the project was canceled and the ship was mothballed and intended to be used as a naval target, but was donated in 1988 to the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. The Tunny was converted to carry special forces off the coast of Vietnam and was decommissioned for the final time and sank as a target ship in June of 1970. Barbero was decommissioned in 1964 and sank as a target off Hawaii the same year. The Grayback was used as an amphibious transport for Navy SEAL units starting in 1967 in Vietnam and was finally decommissioned in January of 1984 and was used as a target ship in the South China Sea in April of 1986. The USS Halibut was overhauled after the Regulus years ended. In February of 1965, it went to overhaul and was redesigned as an attack sub, operating out of California. In 1968, it was refitted once again with a significant amount of specialized equipment and was installed to perform espionage missions against the Soviet Union. These operations included Operation Ivy Bells, which was a mission to tap a Soviet undersea communication cable, and Operation Sand Dollar, which surveyed the wreck of the Soviet K-129 prior to the attempt to raise it by the CIA. The Halibut was decommissioned in 1976 and kept in mothball until 1986 before it was finally struck from the Navy Vessel Register. It was scrapped via the Ship Submarine Recycling Program in 1994.